I think we can go ahead and get started with the privacy and security section. And as people come in, please again, complete the welcome, please sign in form in the chat box. And then I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
Well, good morning. I hope everybody is happy and it's beautiful weather outside. I don't know how you are down south, but it is in the cool fall weather up here in Hillsborough. Privacy and security. Privacy and security is everyone's responsibility. Everyone is expected to provide the highest level of privacy as possible to our clients to inform that we collect and use confidential. So all the information we receive, we've got to keep confidential, and everyone needs to adhere to the CSIS required practices and implement best practices at every level: the computer, the user, the client, and the organization. While you're working in CSIS, you'll be entering clients' personal identifying information. Although many of our clients may not have the best histories, they are still entitled to the same right of privacy as anyone else. The client information you obtain during a service intake or program enrollment is confidential, and the client's right to privacy extends past your current employment or volunteerism and should never be disclosed or discussed outside your current role. Computer security. Computers running CSIS must never be left unattended. Everyone's computers power settings must automatically turn off the display after a reasonable length of time, 15 minutes. Without activity. ServicePoint also has an automatic logout function for users who have been idle for a predetermined period of time. This function decreases the potential viewing and manipulation of client data by unauthorized individuals. Each client and each computer and network is required to have a current and updated antivirus software and be located in a secure location with an individual or network firewall or software. Although the following safeguards are in place within CSIS, it is best practice to log out of CSIS whenever you leave your computer. I would also recommend you put your computer to sleep. This will help protect any agency files or emails that you currently have open. Sleep mode does not close your apps or files, and you can do this by clicking on the window icon and then the power icon and selecting sleep from the list. With many of us working remotely due to COVID, I can't stress enough the importance of having an updated antivirus and software installed on your computer. Does anybody have any questions so far about what I've said? No? Okay. User security. Each user is required to sign a user confidentiality agreement. Each user is issued his or her account. User login and password information must be kept secure and must not be shared with anyone. The system allows only one login per password at a time. In other words, you cannot log into a system on 2 terminals at the same time using a single password. Sharing one's user ID and password is prohibited in CSIS. If known, a user who shares their information can lose their access to CSIS. This policy is not only designed to protect you as the user and the agency, but is also required by HUD Data Technical Standards. HUD Data Technical Standards require all covered homeless organizations to maintain a user log. So ServicePoint records all user responses, access points such as your IP address, and any client information accessed, read, updated, deleted from the system. So to sum it up, ServicePoint can tell us who, when, where, and what has been accessed. Security. For security purposes, licenses have not been used within 30 to 60 days are inactive. Warnings concerning these inactivity are emailed out to you and your supervisor on a monthly basis. Please be aware that CSIS policy states that any license that is not used for 60 or more days is recycled. The user may be required to attend CSIS refresher or a basic skills training before a new license can be issued. To avoid disruption in your access to the system, it is important that you sign in to CSIS at least once a month. If your license has been inactivated, you will be required to contact the system administrator to have it reinstated. Password security. Passwords must be 8 to 16 lengths in character and must contain at least one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, one number, one special character. They will automatically expire every 45 days. When your password expires, you must enter a new one and cannot re-enter the same one. Although you can rotate them, and that's what I do personally. I have two that I rotate back and forth. Any questions so far? No? Okay. Substitution is a great way to add complexity without making a password more difficult. Simple substitution, simply substitute a letter or a number with a special character. Substitute an I with an expression mark, an S with a $sign or a 5, an A with an @ sign, an O with a 0. You can also use phrases such to old cat at. And when I say to, meaning the number 2, old cat, and then the @ sign, which is the A. The idea is to substitute and use a phrase that is difficult to crack, but it's something that you can remember. Whatever you choose is okay, as long as you can remember it. This was a new feature in CSIS. Each user's user ID is associated with their email address that's supplied on the user confidentiality agreement. Email addresses must be unique to the user, and the user's account cannot be created without one. The forgot password setting on the Service Point login page uses this associated link to send users a temporary reset of their send a temporary link to reset their Service Point in cases where the user may have forgotten. It's important when you use this feature, and a lot of people have said that, oh, it doesn't work. And what I'm finding is that they are entering their email address and not their user ID in this box. So that is what you enter. Your email is associated with your user ID. So if you do forget your password, you can click on Forgot Password and then enter your user ID, and the reset link will be sent to the email that's associated with your user ID. Each client must be made aware that their information is to be entered into CSIS. At this time, there is no requirement that the client consent be obtained to enter client information into CSIS. What is the difference between entering and sharing? Entering information to provide basic needs such as food, shelter, food, or other essential services. Sharing information allows providers to connect the client with one or more other CSI participating providers. It should be noted that a client may refuse to have their information entered, such as a social security number, but this may affect their eligibility for services. So although there are several modes of consent, there are referred consent, implied consent, and written consent. Referred consent is a baseline requirement, and the client's consent to release of information is referred from the privacy posting that you should be having at every intake. Implied and informed is a verbal or physical consent, and then we have the written consent. Our COC uses the written consent in regards to the services and program enrollment. Should the client refuse to sign an ROI, it is important that you notify the system administrator, that's me, so that the client's service or enrollment can be locked down. Do we have any questions on this? No? Okay, on to the next one. Yes, go ahead. Do you have something, Lauren?
I do. I thought that this would be a good time for us to just remind everybody that when we are adding clients and we are entering them into the system and they've agreed to share it, that we should be uploading that scanned universal ROI. So we're able to support that that client has agreed to share their information with other service providers. If the client refuses for whatever reason to sign a ROI, that is fine. But like Amy said, we should be contacting you so we can lock them down and not share their information. That is something that we've run into a lot just with various projects, that if their ROI is not scanned and uploaded, we shouldn't be talking about the client. They haven't agreed to it. We don't have any documentation showing that we've agreed that we're talking about the client. So just to kind of reiterate that and the importance of it, you know, and that one consenting adult cannot sign an ROI for another consenting adult. So if there are two adults in a household, each has to have one. Each has to have a universal ROI. So
each client should sign a universal ROI for the sharing of their information among the participating providers. Individual releases are required for each client 18 years or older. ROIs are required to be scanned and attached to the client records. Clients may revoke their consent at any time in writing. The revoke, I can't even pronounce that. I typed it, but I can't pronounce it. will be effective. So when they revoke their rights, it will not be effective on the information collected between the initial release and the time that they have revoked that release. Whenever the communication regarding clients, such as if they refuse to sign an ROI, you should never use their name. You need to use their client ID, please.
Amy?
Yes.
Amy Windich has a question. Do you want to?
Can you read it for me? Oh, go ahead, Amy. All right, let's unmute her. There we go. Oh.
Well, she's asking if we have a 2-adult household for LIHEAP and 1 adult is not present to sign the ROI, how do we handle that? So go ahead.
You would need to get that second signature. You cannot enter the information, or I should say you cannot share the information on the client until that second signature has occurred. You can enter his information, but we need to definitely get that second signature to be able to share.
So we had the same question. Marisol had a similar question at TSAS. I'm unable to complete the LIHEAP application if they can't sign. That's not necessarily, we don't want to create barriers for entry into and for clients to receive these services, but at the same time, we are talking about sharing information. So if the household member that is in front of you is agreeing to share their information and complete the LIHEAP application, then it's something that we need to set up a workflow process that either the client is provided the ROI prior to coming into the appointment as maybe part of a packet, or Brandon, did you want to jump in?
Sure. So there's a couple things you can do here, and again, to be able to share, we're talking about legally being able to share information from one agency to another. And so without that release of information, we're not allowed to do that. There's a couple things you can do to kind of go ahead and move things forward. One would be, or especially with COVID going on, I think one good way would be to be able to provide the packet ahead of time. And just as you require the agency or the clients to bring in certain documentation. For many services, you have to bring in proof of income, you have to bring in bills, you have to bring in different things, requiring that a release of information is signed, or all adults who will be part of this process are able to sign a release of information. Should be part of that initial step that the client has to take prior to getting served. But providing that packet, whether digitally or physically, would probably be the best way forward. Otherwise, the issue that we would run into is, since your clients are then referred on to another agency, normally I would suggest that we could lock the client down, but then when you refer that client on to be provided actual financial assistance, the Salvation Army wouldn't be able to see that information, so it wouldn't work in your particular instance. So yeah, I guess doing it ahead of time would probably be your best bet.
Okay. So as we were talking about sharing, CSIS is a collaborative system. It works best on the behalf of the client when the information can be shared among providers. The universal ROI is designed to allow this, and that is for our whole COC. So as long as there is one ROI with valid dates within the system, you are able then to share the information. Whether your agency requires additional paperwork or additional release, that is an agency decision. But as far as a COC wide, we are requiring that the universal be signed and uploaded and attached to the client's record.
So Amy wanted to, if they can't, so Marisol, I definitely don't want that. If they can't sign, then I can't do the application, correct? I just want to make sure I have the information to provide to the client. That is correct. So but I want to make sure that we're not creating barriers for clients to receive services. We should definitely be exploring creative avenues that don't limit a client's ability. Exactly. Marisol is saying we need to provide the document to the client. So we just don't want this to turn into something that is creating a barrier for our clients to receive any type of services within the COC. But this is something that legally we can't have clients, consenting adults, sign for other consenting adults. It's just how contracts and go ahead.
And I would put into, one of the things I like to put into context to try to help explain these situations is if we look at really kind of any other parts of the world and privacy that all of us deal with, if you go to a bank, you're going to have to make sure that you've signed certain documents, and that if there's any other adults involved, they have to sign documents. You can't do it for them. If you want to go to a doctor's office and need information shared with another doctor, you have to make sure that you've come in and physically signed, releases of information in order to do that. So, these issues are not ones that only we are facing. It's across the board as it pertains to privacy, and in particular with software, how important the privacy is.
Yeah, the HUD data standards, the technical standards require us to be able to share, require us to have an ROI in place. Like I was saying earlier, there's several different models of consent. With some of the federal programs, the privacy and security, the intake can be referred for the sharing of data, but our COC requires that written standards. So it is very important that we adhere to that policy as best we can. Okay. Organization security. Agencies are required to comply with federal, state, and local confidentiality laws. Agencies must have a CSIS privacy notice posted intake or comparable location with the general reason for information collection and reference to the privacy policy. And that's what I was just saying when certain federal funding can refer back to this policy. But again, we require written consent. A standard CSIS privacy notice can be found on the Suncoast Partnerships website under the CSIS HMIS page. Organization security. Agencies should create an environment of confidentiality by restricting open discussion that includes secure information. Agencies must assure that only staff who work directly with clients or who have administrative responsibilities can look at, enter, or edit client records. Additionally, agencies must notify the CSIS systems administrator immediately upon a CSIS user's termination of employment. And that's it. It wasn't so painful, was it? Does anybody have any questions? No?
I definitely want to make sure that everybody is on the same page with the universal ROI. That sparks a lot of questions whenever we talk about it with other agencies. So if anybody has any additional questions regarding that or concerns about, clients being able to access that, if you don't want to ask it here, definitely, Marisol and I had a pretty creative conversation of different ways that we can get clients that aren't present at the time of the referral or service delivery able to get that service regardless, or just find a way around that so we don't, create a barrier. That's what we definitely don't want to do. So, but you can go ahead, Amy.
In the case of the LIHEAP, if the individual is coming in, they should be the individual that's on the bill itself. So when we are referring on from Northport to Salvation Army, we don't want to put a referral on the whole family. We're only putting it on the primary client at the time. So that information on the secondary who may not be there could probably be collected at a later date. If, But just remember, when you're sending a referral, you're only sending it on the primary client, please.
All right. Thank you, Amy. Okay,
I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. There we go. It's back to you.
All righty. So most of us that were on the call, the Access Point HUD updates in the Access Point training, refresher training, HUD was nice enough not to give us a million updates like they normally do. This year, it was pretty specific to the coordinated entry projects. So 2 weeks ago, we had a training with everybody. There's about 40 of us on the call, and we all learned about different, the 3 HUD updates that we're about to go over today. I'm sorry, 4 HUD updates that we're about to go over today. I wanted to share another quiz. If you guys wanted to take a minute, I'd appreciate it. It's going to give us an understanding of your basic skills knowledge. And then midway through this, we can go over this. So if you guys want to click on this basic skills quiz, just to kind of test your knowledge on the basics of the CSIS system. So like I was saying, the HUD updates were pretty specific to coordinated entry, and we did go over these a couple weeks ago. So it's just another refresher for anybody that was not able to attend that training, and to give everybody an idea of what these updates are. So in your coordinated entry assessment, your street outreach assessment, and your emergency shelter assessment, you'll begin seeing the current living situation. If you see this assessment in this sub-assessment in your intake, please fill it out. The current living situation is a sub-assessment that is designed to capture information on where a person is staying at a point in time. It can be updated at each point of contact and will help the COC track where people are including those who are not assessed or referred to coordinated entry events. For the coordinated entry project, you will record a current living situation anytime the following occurs. So when a coordinated entry assessment or coordinated entry event is recorded, the client's current living situation changes. So for instance, they would go from literally homeless on the streets to an emergency shelter. We would want to capture that movement. If a current living situation has not been recorded for longer than 90 days, or the client enters a project, you definitely want to just keep an eye on that when you are working with a client or are referred to a client. If you see that current living situation sub-assessment in your intake, please add information to it. Just another way for us to be able to follow the client as they move through our system.
Lauren,
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to mention also that current living situation sub-assessment also pertains to street outreach. This and the PATH programs. This is actually the contact piece. It replaced the contact sub-assessment that was in their current assessment or in their assessments. This has now replaced that. So that needs to be filled out for all of those street outreach programs, as well as the PATH programs anytime a contact is made with the client. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy. So the current living situation is pretty simple. We're going to do the start date, end date, and information. These will typically be the same dates. We're going to click the calendar with the green check to auto-populate the calendar date. And then we select the current living situation here. It's the same pick list. It's the same drop down as the residence prior. And then your living situation verified, you're going to locate your agency's name or project from the drop down list. It is an exhaustive list, and we are working with WellSky to get that list minimized for user ease. And then we're going to ask, is client going to have to leave the current living situation within 14 days? So depending on the answer, we will either answer yes and then answer the subsequent questions, or say no and save an exit. So when we're asking if the client is going to have to leave their current living situation within 14 days, and we answer yes, these subsequent questions will appear, and it's asking if the client has identified subsequent residents. Do they have individual or family resources? It's another way to drive that diversion conversation and identify another resource or other resources for the clients. And my dog is barking, excuse me. Darn coworker. Your HUD update number 2. Did anybody have any questions on the current living situation HUD update numero 1? Okay, so if you see that current living situation sub-assessment in your intake, please fill it out. Amy has done an excellent job of going through people's intakes and making sure that only those that are required by HUD to fill them out are filled out. Just like any other assessment, if there are questions in your intake that are there, they are required. There shouldn't be questions left unanswered. The best way for us to get an idea and have a pulse to the system is by answering every question that is on your assessment and in your intake. So the coordinated entry assessment. This again is specific to coordinated entry. This assessment is the provider's access point. In the provider's access point intake, we'll identify the coordinated entry access point intake. So information required to be entered in this assessment include the date, location of the intake, assessment type, assessment level, and result of the assessment. This element assists the continuum of care to monitor the coordinated entry process as it relates to client outcomes. So what we're going to collect here is very basic. And this is specific to our access points. For every access point entry created, there should be a coordinated entry assessment completed for the same date. The date of the assessment and end date are the same date. Click the calendar with the green check to auto-populate calendar date. Select your assessment location from the drop-down menu. And then it's not showing. There's a lag. Can you guys see my? There.
Yes.
Okay. Select the assessment type you are conducting. The housing, so you're conducting a housing needs assessment. The assessment type is either in person, virtual, or over the phone. Your assessment level is a housing needs assessment, and your prioritization status is placed on prioritization list. So in this sub-assessment, there are options for assessment level, our crisis needs assessment, and housing needs assessment. We are not currently utilizing the crisis needs assessment option. And then for prioritization status, it is either they are placed on the list or they are not. And as we all know, for every client that enters our coordinated entry system, they are typically placed on the community by name prioritization list. Coordinated entry event. So you must fill out the coordinated entry event sub-assessment. This sub-assessment in the provider's access point intake is designed to capture key referral and placement elements, as well as the results of those events. This sub-assessment will assist communities in understanding the events that go into achieving outcomes through the coordinated entry system. Coordinated entry events must be recorded at the same time as a coordinated entry assessment. So these are all of these updates are going to affect the overall workflow of your access point intake workers, which we will go over in just a moment. So for every access point entry created, there should be a coordinated entry event completed for the same date. We're going to have our start date, end date, and date of event as the same date. We're going to click the calendar with the green check to auto-populate calendar date. Select referral to housing navigation project or services from the event drop-down list and save. There are other event types that are included in that referral to housing in that event type. So I'm going to pull up Service Point real quick. Does anybody have any questions in the meantime? So although HUD was nice enough to only provide us these few updates to the system, they also decided to throw in that the start date, end date, and that the start date and end date are on the same date, which kind of messes up all of the end dates are the day before you create a new one. So that's a lot of fun. Okay. So I've got good old Brandon Test here, and we're going to look at his access point. And as we all know, just because there is information already populated in Brandon's assessment, we want to make sure that we are asking the question live, that we are complete, current, consistent, and correct. For instance, Brandon is coming into me as an individual, and I see right here that his household type is family with children. We want to make sure that we're changing that and then going back and managing that household after we're done with our intake. All of these questions should be asked and answered live. We are grading on consistency, as you all know, for these top prior living situation, length of stay, approximate date homelessness started, total number of times the client has been homeless on the street or an emergency shelter, and then total number of months. So something like this would not be consistent. We see inconsistencies in that the client's been staying at the emergency shelter for over a year, and they've been homeless 4 more times, but their approximate date homelessness started is not consistent with the year or longer, and the total number of months is not consistent with the length of stay, the approximate date homelessness started, or the number of times. Because we have to remember that when we're talking about the total number of months on the street, we must think in the last 3 years. So if we are saying that in the last 3 years, he's had 4 separate instances of homelessness, that would equal at least 4 months. Additionally, we can look to the calendar and see that February was such a simpler time. We were all working in the office, and I mean, COVID-19 hadn't hit us yet. I remember January and February of last year. That was a very nice time. Yes, ma'am.
Also, I'd like to mention that when we talk about the regardless of where they stayed and the total number of months, that plays into our chronic homelessness. So we definitely need to get that history correct, as well as the prior episode of the questions above correct. To get an accurate count of those who are chronically homeless in our system, please pay attention to those as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amy. And the zip, I mean, this is just a time for us to, with everybody on the call, to reiterate how important every single one of these pieces of data are to our clients. The zip code of last stable address, we are using the data, and other COCs across the nation are using that data to target areas and neighborhoods with higher eviction rates. So potentially we could target services for areas that might be experiencing a higher eviction rate than others. So if you have that zip code, please ask and answer so we can use that information and potentially provide services to, an area that wouldn't otherwise be served. It's all trying to make sure that our resources are going to those that are most in need. So the COVID-19 information also, this is the only place in our system as of right now that we are able to get a pulse on the effects of COVID-19 to our homeless crisis response system. If you see this question or any question in your assessment, please ask and answer. We will be asked in, I'm sure, a matter of months, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your homeless crisis response system? And because of the data that you guys enter and collect for our clients, we will be able to actually provide a realistic number. So from the drop down, and I do actually just remind myself that I have to add loss of income. That was something that we discussed. Thank you, Lynn. And I will add that today from the pick list. So we have the drop down that if the client is experiencing homelessness or at risk, what is the contributing factor? So a lot of clients are either unable to pay rent or mortgage, the eviction, illness of family member, a loss of job. So it was brought to our attention that maybe they didn't lose their job, but they've definitely lost income. Their hours have been cut. So we're going to add that to the pick list. So that's an option as well. My apologies for not doing that last training. Here's your current living situation. This is for us to see the movements of the client within the system. Your medical information, again, just something that we always want to make sure is complete, current, consistent, correct. Just because it says yes up here, we want to click your magnifying glass, click your disability determination to filter all the yeses to the top. We want to ask and answer and confirm with our clients. Do you have a mental health problem? Do you have a chronic health problem? And continue down. Do you have an alcohol addiction, developmental issue, both drug and alcohol abuse? we can ask and answer any of these questions and add any disabilities or end any active ones that may not be current. So maybe he no longer identifies as having a mental health issue. We're going to end that for the day before we're collecting new information. Income, always want to ask and answer and verify. My coworker is being so rude right now. I'm sorry, guys, if you can hear him. Again, we want to filter the monthly amount to the top. Click right there. This will put all of the incomes that are in here, and they all have an end date. He is not currently receiving any income. Okay, so we want to make sure it's consistent. We know that this is no longer correct, and do it like that. Additional information, another area. If these questions are on your assessment, please answer them. We applied for a domestic violence bonus project in the HUD COC NOFA using the data that was entered into this additional information column. We were not awarded, oh, I'm sorry, we have a hand up. Amy, please feel free, anybody that has a question or anything, to either interrupt me or go right ahead and type in the chat box. How do we answer the question? Don't ever apologize for asking questions. I apologize for my rude coworker if you can hear him. How do we answer the COVID-19 question for children in the home or the other adults, not just head of household? So you would, after you get done with this assessment, you would just the same as when you have to answer, well, I didn't include anybody into the entry, anybody else, but their names would be listed here to the left. And you would, of course, go through and select them. And then the same assessment would populate, and you would answer all the questions for the entire household. Does that answer your question, Amy? Okay. Yeah, the head of a household lost their job. Child didn't lose job. No, of course not. So your children, your household members that are entered into the project will be listed here, and the child would be no. Yes, exactly. Well, Brandon, Amy, that is a very, how would we be responding to the children?
Well, is this question only supposed to be asked of adults 18 and over?
Yes.
Then there you go. So we wouldn't be asking the children. So it would be NA. Oh. Here's my coworker, everybody. Wave. I'm the one that's barking in the background. All right, sorry guys. Good question though, Amy. All right, scroll back. So back on my additional information, if these questions are here, please ask and answer. We are only able to get a pulse on our community by the answer and the data that you all enter. We did not receive the domestic violence bonus dollars. I don't know if it was because we didn't have the data to support need in our community, but the only way we can support a need in our community is by the data that you all enter. So please ask and answer. Our contact and housing information, excellent place and best place to provide the most recent contact information for our clients. Regardless of your project, please add this information for your client. It is another way for you, if you are doing follow-ups, to be able to have a phone number, have an email address, have a home address. So if we're doing follow-ups in the future, or you just want to check in with the client, that you have that information in a central location. Specifically for our access point users and other housing projects, When you send a referral to another agency for that client and there is no contact information, it is very difficult for that referring agency to be able to contact the client. So please, if you see information here that is not correct, you want to end and add another. Phone number, its email address, and then we can save. So now we know that this is where the client is currently staying, his phone number, and his email address if we want to be able to get into contact after the service is delivered. We're going to go through our VI SPDAT. We're not going through it in this class. Please select the appropriate VI SPDAT. We have our individual VI SPDAT for people 25 years and older, a VI SPDAT for the families, and a VI SPDAT for our unaccompanied homeless youth. Your coordinated entry assessment. This is one of our new HUD updates and required to be filled out by access point users. Housing needs, placed on list. This is what your information will look like. We're going to save. Your coordinated entry event. This is where we are able to see all of the referrals and activities that are going on with the client. Typically, we would not see multiple referrals to a housing navigation project. We would see the referral to Shelley, which is the housing navigation project, possibly a referral to an emergency shelter. So maybe this client was literally homeless on the streets, and we're going to refer them to Salvation Army Manatee.
Laura, Lauren, this is a place that we're recording it, but the actual referral still needs to be done. When we pull the data from the system, it is going to come from that referral and populate there. So please, even though we're recording information here, still do the referral to Shelley's project.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if we were doing this access point for the first time, we would do a referral to Housing Navigation Project, which is Shelley, save and add another, because we're going to refer the client to an emergency shelter bed. If event answer was referral to emergency shelter, transitional housing, joint TH to RRH, rapid rehousing, PSH, or other permanent housing opening, please answer the following question. And it's asking us where are we referring the client to. So again, this is an exhaustive list, and we are working on reducing the different options that are available here. So we're going to refer him to the Men's Overnight Lodge at the Salvation Army Manatee, and then save. This will show our tracking of the client in the system. But like Amy said, even if we're done here, we still need to go in and add a referral. I'm not going to go through that process because I want to make sure that we're in the interest of time. If additional referrals were made after the access point intake, we want to make sure that we're adding interims and tracking those there. It can be simple as an update, save and continue. Oh, we have to, red flag, Amy. We are still working on getting all the bugs, and we will add the interim review assessment, which will be identical to the intake process. Just if we want to make sure that we're also going to be doing no more than one assessment for the client after October 1st. So if clients need to haven't received an intake in 6 months or more, that old rule is out the door. We want to just maintain this one entry because we are also no longer exiting the client. We are keeping the client open, which is HUD update number 4. Do not exit the client from one by one. We want to keep the client open in the system in coordinated entry. By not exiting clients, communities will be able to track participants' entire journey through coordinated entry from access to exit. This means communities will have information on how well coordinated entry is performing, and participants' trauma will be reduced because they do not have to tell their story multiple times throughout assessment phases. Clients will not be exited until they are permanently housed. So exits should occur at the point of a successful referral to permanent housing, and this is actually going to be a known move-in date. So the client is not exited upon referral, they're exited upon housing. The client has not had a project entry, contact, or bed night in HMIS for 90 days or more, which is, we're still working that out as a COC. And then a client is known to have died or moved out of the COC geographic region. That's when we would also exit the client. And that's it. Those are all of our HUD updates. HUD was pretty kind to us this year. If we do, Irene is asking if we have not done the assessment previously and exited them, should we do a new assessment? So we're still having conversations and looking at what other COCs are doing. If the client has done an assessment in your system or has done an assessment and we don't have, the best thing is to send Shelly Hummel an email. Do not have the client call Shelly. You can call Shelly, but do not have the client call her. Send Shelly an email so the client is on her radar to review. Maybe something happened with the access point, maybe it's outdated. She will be able to provide further guidance from there. Go ahead.
HUD does not require us to go back in time.
Okay.
But as a COC, that, the policy is still under review. But as far as HUD is concerned, we do not need to go back. Originally, this was supposed to take effect on April 1st. Of course, with COVID, it got pushed back to October 1st, along with a lot of other reporting requirements. But they do not require us to go back in time. It's just forward from this point.
Okay. So Irene or anyone, yeah, it's to look at the date of the assessment. I'd say if it was a very long time ago, to definitely, either way, give Shelly an email so she can respond appropriately. That would be on a case-by-case basis of whether to do new assessments. It would definitely depend on the intake. It would depend on when it happened and everything else. So whether the client was housed and then came back, their activity in the COC. So with that, I just want to post another little quiz so we can test your knowledge. And in that time, if anybody else has any other questions, we would greatly appreciate any dialogue. Now's the time if you have pressing questions about CSIS and things that you commonly run into that are just so frustrating and you wish you could ask the question but never had the time. Now's the time.
Yeah, you got all three of us here.
I wanted to review the basic skills quiz. If anybody has been able to take that. Oh, great, 24 responses, excellent. Let me see if I can pull the, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Excellent, we've got a lot of 100% on all of the, let me stop sharing this screen. I'm working on 2 computers right now. Okay.
How does everybody like these quizzes? Is a question. I mean, how do you feel about these? Are these easy to access, or are you having any difficulty with it? Or I'm pretty sure we're probably all hat set at this point. At least Zoom and team meetings.
Oh yeah, I definitely think they're easy, but I've never done well on. Lynn says they are easy, but I've never done well on quizzes and tests. Well, I'm sure you got 100% on this.
We won't post any individual scores.
Never. No, the idea is just to get an idea, you know, a pulse on whether the information, I think we all, and Suncoast is really doing what we can to make sure that when we are doing basic skills, that you're not inundated with so much information you leave with your head spinning, you know, and this is just a way for us to see, you know, whether the information is being comprehended or not. So if the client is already in CSIS with information, I don't need to review or change any of it. Everybody said false. That's 100% for the COC. Oh my gosh, I wish we had like in person, I'd be throwing Tootsie Rolls at everybody. Awesome. What is required for you to be able to share information? Amy went over that, and it is the universal release of information, 100% for everybody. If a client is currently in housing, I should give them an access point intake. 100% for everybody again. All computers must have up-to-date antivirus software. True, 100% for everyone. Which residence prior is an example of a client who is literally homeless? Staying or living with a family member, emergency shelter, place not meant for habitation, or hotel paid for by client. Your 2 responses are the emergency shelter and place not meant for habitation. If a client is staying or living in a family member's room or apartment or house, you would list that client as at risk, not a category 2, but just you're at risk. That would be the same for a hotel paid for by client. We like that at risk is a really good catch-all for those kind of sticky situations where you're really not sure. But for literally homeless clients, your 2 answers are emergency shelter, place not meant for habitation, or a hotel paid for by an emergency shelter or service provider. We have a lot of service providers that have some great hotel vouchers right now. I do not have to answer additional information fields. That answer is false. So we just want to make sure that we are capturing every bit of data that is in your assessment. Okay. The client's contact information can be left blank or withhold information. False, false. We want to be able to talk to the client after we've received the services and provided them, right? Is it okay to discuss information about a client with my family or friends? False. Great question. 100% for everybody. Diverting clients will not end their homeless situation. We are 50-50 on that as a COC. That's surprising. I guess maybe if we're taking this as a literal situation, that diverting clients will not always end their homeless situation, but it has been found that having that diversion conversation definitely benefits the client and can end their homeless situation before it begins or sometimes very shortly thereafter. Having those creative conversations and those problem-solving conversations will definitely Does anybody do you guys want to discuss? We have till 11. I don't want to harp on this, but diversion is a huge component of our homeless crisis response system.
There's more and more diversion programs coming out, and HUD is pushing those. So it is important that it is a topic that will be, if not discussed now, discussed at further meetings and throughout our COC.
Amy, did you start sharing something?
No.
Okay. Yeah, we have, if any agency, this would be a great time for collaboration and a great time for agency comments. We had on our access point training, we had a lot of really excellent examples of diversion. Yes, Irene, they may be able to be diverted, but may not be for long term, putting them homeless again. Yeah, diversion is, sometimes it's a temporary situation. Sometimes a temporary situation can turn into a long-term housing solution. It does vary by client. I think that
diverting especially in cases of family, diverting a family from shelter helps reduce that trauma that the children may experience living in that type of environment.
And if I may add, just kind of my thoughts on diversion. When we're talking about diversion, we're really trying to divert somebody from immediate homelessness. You know, so coming into the shelter, staying in a place not meant for habitation. We're not talking about just telling them to go find somewhere else to go and then being done with them. It's okay. The shelter is not going to be the best solution if you have other opportunities, or even diverting them from the coordinated entry system. If it's somebody who is likely not going to qualify for rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing, you know, having those diversion conversations, number one, helps them think about maybe resources available to them through friends or family that they hadn't considered, trying to resolve, you know, issues that may be causing them to seek the shelter. You know, that's something that Taylor and Amanda have done through our family diversion program a lot, is try to rebuild some of those relationships that allows families to not have to leave where they're staying and seek shelter. But we're not saying do this and we're done. It's let's find somewhere else safe for you to go tonight and for at least a short term, and then look at maybe other options and services that can kind of be of help at that point. So, you know, it's like, you know, rapid rehousing is probably not going to be appropriate. But if we can find somewhere else for you to stay tonight, then maybe SOS would be appropriate, or maybe we can have some discussions about, you know, what are the barriers you're facing? Is it that you're having trouble with employment, utility issues, you know, and then see what types of other assistance.
We have had Amanda Rosado come in from the Florida Housing Coalition. She's done some excellent diversion trainings, which are available on our website. I'll get you, we will go to the training section. Chris Johnson said, diversion takes a fundamental shift in our thinking that moves us from let me get you into homeless services to let me try to find a way that you don't need services.
And I like what Chris phrased there, you know, and just the overall fundamental thought process behind that is something that I could certainly relate to. Is somebody comes to you with a problem and your first thought is, what are the resources I have to solve their problem? What are the services I can offer them? What are the things that I can do? And I do the same thing. I mean, if my wife comes to me and says, hey, I'm having an issue with my computer, the first thing I want to do is say, how can I help you figure it out? But oftentimes that's not what she wants. She wants to kind of do it on her own. And so with clients, as they're coming in for services, you know, yes, our first thought is going to be, what do I have available to me that can help you through this? But sometimes the better option is, okay, there's not going to be a whole lot of great services and we have very limited resources. let's have some discussions about things that you may already have available to you that can help you, help prevent you from even needing these services here.
All our presentations can be found on the training area, in the training area, whether it is the Florida Homeless Coalition presenting for us or Lauren presenting. And of course, this PowerPoint today and recording will be placed out there as well.
Yeah, there's some excellent resources in here. I just shared the link if you guys want to in the chat for this exact page. And here's our diversion early intervention training. Oh, we do have a checklist outside of the presentation that I will, I'll be sure to add that too. It's very basic. I mean, the questions that we want to ask before we are entering clients into literally homeless projects are the same as what's on our assessment. Where did you stay last night? How long have you been there? And then based off those questions, it's really driving the conversation of, well, what can we do to keep you there? Or what can we do to get you back there? Are you safe there? We have a really good diversion assessment also that some of our family providers use, and Amanda uses for family diversion. Nick uses it for the individual's diversion, and it drives those questions. You know, if you weren't able to get services today, what else could you do? What is creating your housing crisis? Is it the lack of a job? Is it, I mean, of course, we're in Sarasota, Manatee, and in the United States, so housing affordability is a big one. But it's looking at what resources the client currently has to assist in resolving that situation. Does anybody else have any other tips and what has worked with them? I'd love to hear from our other service providers and what doesn't work, you know, roses and thorns. What doesn't work about diversion? Like Irene said, yes, some clients are able to resolve their homeless situation and not return through diversion. But some of those clients that maybe have experienced literal homelessness for longer, they're a little bit harder. They're harder to resolve, self-resolve. I had seen in one of the NA National Alliance to End Homelessness trainings, an image of the Russian dolls, where you have those Russian dolls, and they're examples of length of time homeless. And the largest Russian doll was under a week of homelessness. Well, that's a client that is likely to be diverted. And then as time goes on and the dolls get smaller, you have less likely of a chance to be diverted from the system. So the more chronically homeless clients, they will be more difficult to divert. Does that mean that we shouldn't try at all? Not necessarily, but it's definitely something that the longer you're homeless, the less likely it will be to divert them. Okay, so from there, we're just going to go over a few more questions. Everybody got 100% on number 11. Number 12. So if information is old in a sub-assessment, what date do I end that old information? The correct answer is the day before we are entering new information. Everybody got number 13 correct, and we're good. Did anybody want to share anything else with the class?
I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. I know I was struggling not to call out today because it's such a beautiful day. Just joking, Brandon.
I wanted to just review the test your knowledge quizzing. I appreciate the 16 people that did fill that out. Thank you so much. We're going to review this and we'll be done with the day. Does anybody All right, let me share this. The more I'm thinking of it, how much fun once we can all get together to have like a COC carnival. I think that would be so much fun for everybody. Our next COC general meeting will be held at Robarts Arena. There will be cotton candy, popcorn, relay races. Chris Johnson will be in the CEO dunk tank. So you guys come on out and have a good time. Excellent. Yes, yes. Maybe we should start a donation. Get that going. A fund. Yes, fundraising event. Just to have a good time. Pie eating contest. Yes, that would be amazing. There are 3 new HUD mandated updates. There are 4 HUD mandated updates. We are adding current living situation, coordinated entry assessment, coordinated entry event, and then we are no longer exiting clients. The current living situation identifies the type of assessment completed with the client. That was a tricky question, and I should have reworded that. The current living situation sub-assessment is where we are collecting the client's information. So everybody gets a pass on that one. That was a teacher mistake. The coordinated entry event date and date of event will have the different date than the access point entry date. That is false. Good job, everybody. Housing needs assessment is the assessment type to be selected for coordinated entry. Good job, everybody, again. And I should exit the client when I am done with the referral from 1 by 1. That is a false. So we are just, these quizzes and tests are, again, not punitive, just a way for us to get an idea of how effective the training was and or stuff we need to review in the future. So we are definitely not exiting clients. And if you are in coordinated entry projects, please add information to all of the new HUD sub-assessments. So from there, I do not have anything else. If anybody, does any agency have any information they want to share since we're all on the call? Okay. Well, we cut that with all that information provided. We were able to get done before our meeting time. We do have a COC meeting that is coming up on October, let's see.
21st.
Thank you, Brandon. October 21st. It is not at Robarts. It'll be held virtually. I will be in my own personal pie eating contest. So thank you, Andy. You guys have a great day. You're excused from the training unless anybody has any other questions. We'd be happy to hold on the line for them.
Once again, thank you everyone for attending and have a great rest.
Thank you, Valerie.